But first, Miles O'Brien reports from Cuba, where scientists are working to protect the island's rich diversity of wildlife, some of it found nowhere else on Earth, against growing pressures, both human and wild, from the outside. It's another in our weekly series, The Leading Edge of Science.
If you want to see a rare Cuban crocodile, you best get to know this man first. Toby Ramos is Cuba's croc whisperer. For more than 4 decades, he has lived in Cuba's Zapata swamp, hoping to bring the reptiles back from the brink of extinction. They are feisty, ferocious, and able to jump, as we saw at a nearby breeding center.
The Cuban crocodile is very bold and unafraid of humans. They come right up to investigate any disturbance in the water. They stand their ground, even if you try to capture them. This makes them easier to catch than their American counterpart.
Which is one big reason they are in such trouble.
Wow. Can I touch?
Yes.
Yeah. Much drier than you would think, you know?
Once we let our crocodile swim free, we got back in the boat and gunned it. A big thunderstorm was brewing. Keeping these crocodiles alive is not easy already, but add to the mix the growing pressure as tourism increases here in Cuba. As more people come here, there is more pressure on these animals, and it makes it much harder to keep them alive.
Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's me here, Lavender here, and today I'm back with another environmental topic. Today I want to talk about the Real Cuba, biodiversity work in Cuba, environmentalism, science, research statistics, and wildlife conservation that's going on in Cuba. Before we get started, by the way, this is a deep dive video. Before we get started, my other YouTube videos related to this topic will be linked on the screen right now and also linked in the description down below if you'd like to check them out. So let's get started into this YouTube video. Showcasing Cuba's environmentalism and biodiversity and wildlife science achievements, Cuba is one of the few countries that has shown a strong commitment to the environment and sustainability despite a number of obstacles such as the ongoing genocidal U.S. blockade and embargoes and the threat of U.S. imperialism. Fidel Castro's enduring environmental and healthcare stand out as monumental achievements for Cuba under his decades of rule. While he emerged as a stalwart of anti-imperialism and anti-capitalism, his commitment to environmentalism and conservation and Cuba's achievements in the areas gets less attention. Before the dangers of climate change were all established within scientific communities and indeed popular knowledge, Fidel Castro spoke of the need to radically change the way societies interact with their environments. From precious coral reefs to lush mangroves, the Caribbean jewel called Cuba needs protecting, boasting extraordinary biodiversity throughout its waters, forests, and wetlands. Cuba is home to over 6,000 plant species, half of which are found nowhere else in the world. Cuba has a flora of striking richness with a total number of native flowering species estimated at nearly 8,000 and countless wildlife species. From endangered manatees to the world's smallest bird, Cuba contains the Caribbean's largest mangroves forests, with 36% of all coral reefs in the region. Throughout its history, Cuba has shown a strong commitment to wildlife and nature conservation, and currently 25% of its marine and coastal environments are under protection. Its ecosystems have therefore remained healthier over the past several decades than those many other countries that are in the Caribbean. Because of a reforestation program which started in 1998, forests make up 30.6% of the island's nation land area, and the country has been able to maintain sustained forest growth. According to Cuba's National Officer of Statistics and Information, when Fidel Castro claimed victory in the Cuban Revolution in 1959, only 14% of Cuba was thought to be covered in forests. Spanish colonization and foreign-owned timber and sugarcane industries and companies played a significant role in destroying significant amounts of forests and causing deforestation, which was estimated at around 90% before the Spanish landed on the island. There are more than 1,000 square miles of coral reefs in Cuba. These and other marine coastal ecosystems, like mangroves, provide natural protection for coastlines against erosion, flooding, and other impacts of the capitalism-caused climate change crisis. Cuba has several prominent mountains and hills. The lakes are small and more properly classified as freshwater or saltwater lagoons. Cuba has over 200 rivers, as well as small streams that are dry in the summer. The national parks in Cuba provide wonderfully abundant varieties of natural life. In Cuba, there are very particular animal wildlife species like the smallest frog of the North Hemisphere, Monte Alvia dwarf Edolf, and the bee hummingbird is known as the smallest bird in the world. The Cuban soldin, a giant among the insectivorous mammals, and the Cuban gar are considered living fossils. When it comes to the plants in Cuba, the Cuban royal palm is the national tree that is one of the best characteristics of the Cuban countryside, and it is so featured in the national coat of arms. The national flower is the white ginger or butterfly jasmine. The most notable species include the cork palm and the Mongolia, among others. The orchards have outstanding colors, flawless shapes, and exist for more than 300 species. Epidemic to Cuba stands out the black orchard and the Bow quartz adelia, the last one discovered in the 20th century. Cuban scientists are racing to save one of the world's rarest crocodilian species, the Cuban crocodile. Ciénaga del Zapata, Cuba, shirtless and waist-deep in mud and dark waters of Cuba's palm-speckled Zamta swamp, researcher Perez releases a baby crocodile that was confiscated from illegal hunters and poachers back into the wild. It is a small victory, he says, a bigger battle. Cuban crocodiles are a species found only in Cuba, only in certain parts of Cuba, and in swamp on Cuba's Isle of Youth are critically endangered crocodilian species and have the smallest natural habitat left of any living crocodile species, scientists say. We are trying to bring them back from the edge of extinction, Perez said, the scientist. Illegal hunting and reproduction with American crocodiles, which muddies the purebred species genetics, have for decades threatened populations here in Cuba. A warming climate caused by capitalism, which alters the sex ratio of newborn crocs via their egg temperature, poses a new threat, and despite the fact that the Cuban government has protected virtually all of the vast swamps in Cuba, widely considered to be the best preserved in the Caribbean, that may still not be enough, scientists say. Cuban scientists estimate around only 4,000 Cuban crocodiles live in the wild, but because the area they prefer within the wetland is a relatively small area, a capitalism-caused climate change disaster, increasingly common now globally, could wipe out most of the population, leaving the species of crocodilian on the brink of full-on extinction. These concerns decades ago prompted the Cuban government to underwrite a hatchery program that annually releases several hundred crocodiles into the wild. Researchers like Perez also liberate crocodiles confiscated from hunters and from poachers as part of the program that has helped reduce poaching of the species. The sale of crocodile meat in Cuba is tightly controlled by the state, and only those crocodiles with physical defects or hybrid genetics, for example, are allowed to be served in restaurants. An illegal market, however, can still be found in some areas, particularly around the swamp. Cuba has declared Este del Archipiélago de los Colorados a new marine protected area. This new MPA covers about half of the 4 major places surrounding the country and hosts exceptional marine life and biodiversity, including Antillean manatees, American crocodiles, and the critically endangered hawkbill sea turtles ecological surveys and studies conducted in support of the establishment of this new MPA revealed an incredibly range of biodiversity and science statistics, including abundant populations of manatees found in seagrass beds, mouths of rivers and inlets. Hawkbill, green, and loggerhead turtles breed in Cuba's clear waters, but today their coral reef habitat is under threat, and these turtles and their eggs have suffered poaching in the past. Under Fidel Castro, Cuba has also become a world leader in urban farming. In Havana alone, more than 87,000 acres have been dedicated to urban agriculture, including food production, animal husbandry, and forestry. In 2005, Havana's urban gardens produced 272 metric tons of vegetables.